Hello! It's Hebby. Time for part 9 of making every Wings of Fire dragon into a plushie. This was meant to be part 8, but April Fool's Day approached faster than I thought it would. In this challenge, I'm making every character, or nearly every character, from my favourite dragon book series in approximately alphabetical order. So far, we've gone through Albatross, Anemone, Auklet, Arctic with unzippable chest, Blister, Blaze, Burn, Blue, Battle Winner, My OC, Calamity, Coral, Carnelian, Cricket, Clearsight, Clay, and a certain dragon who shall not be named. And you can make them too, because the patterns I've made for the dragons are up for free on my Patreon. You can click the link in the description, scroll a bit, download them, print them out, and follow along on this slow descent into madness. Here's a lightning fast update on the potential extra characters for a wild round. When I reach a letter, I either have no characters for or only one character. You can vote for whoever you want in the comments and I'll write a tally down. I don't have a form for this, we are in low-tech caveman times. But you can vote as many times as you like on each new video, because I think it's fair if you get to change your mind or are really wanting to see the unnamed Icewing prisoners who get the blueberry jam beat out of them in the skywing arena. Your previous vote will not be discounted. Okay, on with the plushie progress. We still have some more sea names. There's a lot of sea names, but it's definitely not the biggest category. Next up is our first skywing, Prince Cliff. Little baby Prince Cliff. That means it's time to make some skywing tweaks to our baby dragon pattern. We used this last for a sea wing, and I'll just edit it a little for each kind of new baby we come across in this series. It doesn't need to be edited that much because it's so small. You can barely see it, they're like peanuts. Don't eat them. But the wings are much bigger, as well as the horns are wobbly. I'm curious to see how that comes out since it's tiny. And the body side pieces are also a lot slimmer for the skywing. Sorry baby sea wings, you're all a bit fat. I picked a dark maroon colour for Cliff as well as 2 different oranges. I only give some parts of this a seam allowance, such as the legs, wings, and spine part. Okay, time to sew, starting with the spikes. I do the spine on the machine as well as all the other pieces I added seam allowance to in the last list. Most of the dragon is by hand. Contrary to popular belief, doing things by machine is actually usually harder, because in machine sewing you have less time to make decisions. You also have to make sure everything lays flat without punching through too many layers. Pinning and setup is very hard for a machine-sewn piece, especially small ones. And doing things by hand can actually be a lot easier. So if you're a beginner, you should do everything by hand, just to figure out how to put the pieces together the first time. I decided that the body side pieces for these tiny dragons are way too hard to make on the machine though. Cliff is shorter than the length of my palm, but larger than a newborn button quail. The regular sized dragons are about as long as my snake Jekyll is wide when he is a ball, or about 1.3 TI-84 graphics calculators. I can't think of any more common household objects. Oh, other than my feet, if you're a size 9.5 men's. If you don't have feet, borrow someone else. But you can tell that this plushie is very small, and I am enamored with that, despite the fact it's sort of hard to get detail in them. And once it's done, we're also going to turn this maroon coloured pea pod right side out. I stuffed the little guy fairly firmly and also included some beans. Not sure if it made any difference. Anyways, this plushie might be smaller, but they take a similar amount of time to large sized dragons, which is about 3 or more days per plush. The only real difference between hand and machine for a simple part, such as the spine or wings, which are flat and just large enough to sew without all the pieces being chewed up, is the time aspect. So if you want to save time, roughly half of the time, you could do it all on the machine. You get a lot more precision by hand, so I do my dragons, even the big size ones, about 50% by hand anyway, and these little ones are about 75%. The head is very similar to the large size ones, except of course small, which means I do that part by hand. It's too hard to lose those crisp snout lines on machine. Or worse yet, the machine crunches up your sewing into a little ball and spits it out like chewing gum on the side of the road. Or one of the other miscellaneous little road gemstones you notice when walking around. Now to sew up the body parts, including the microscopic nose horn. Be careful with this. It can get lost, I say from experience. In hindsight, the curve of the horn is almost negligible, but I went with it anyway. Same with the ears. These are crumb-sized, but there's meant to be an upward side and a down-facing side. Turning tiny pieces right side out is actually extremely difficult, and I used some tweezers rather than what I usually have, which is a blunt pair of scissors I got in the 3rd grade. I think scissors are better than a pencil because you'll be able to grab and hold the edges of your fabric. Just don't use sharp scissors, you will regret that. Anyways, time to add the facial features to this pathetic speck. I'm one of those people who likes tiny things more than anything in the world, and who also especially likes tiny functional things. It pleases the same receptor in my brain that likes those things to know that making one of these small dragons takes the same process as making a big one, but in micro scale. And it's especially amusing that they have tiny little ears and nose horns and the like. And peepers. Cliff's eyes are described as big and goldfish coloured. Goldfish are domestic animals. They don't appear like they do in pet stores in the wild. But in this universe, there's also goats, as evidenced by them being in Scarlet's dinner dungeon. So maybe humans in this world did domesticate carp for pets, and then a dragon kidnapped a fishbowl and Peril saw it at some point in the Sky Kingdom for her to think that. Maybe dragons domesticated carp. They don't have anything better to do now they're not killing each other, except dig for shiny things. They clearly have some sort of dragon precious mineral mine to have all of these gemstones. They can't just be from pre-scorching human collections. If the dragons haven't domesticated carp or ran a mine, they should get into that. Anyways, time to do Cliff's legs, which are tiny but follow the same process as the big ones. Honestly, doing these on the machine barely saves any time, since I spend way too long going slowly around each curve. And also I do the foot pad by hand regardless. So this is totally up to you. But Cliff is definitely not evil. He is just a creature. He does want to see his grandmother, Scarlet, get murdered, but that's probably not an uncommon feeling amongst his peers. Amongst the whole continent, honestly. So I'm not going to count that as a point against him. Cliff also likes Peril, at least a little, and everyone in the Sky Kingdom looks down on her a bit, so at least he doesn't think she should have been executed. Cliff is cute and boisterous. Scarlet doesn't like him, but that's a point for consideration of him being even better, because Scarlet prefers her allies at a comfortable 27 out of 10 for evilness. And she's honestly even worse as a grandmother than she is as a mother. And also Cliff can sing. That's fun. And dragons can be bards, according to the Icewing section of the guide. I suppose Cliff can be the bard of the Skywing Palace. So that's that. Cliff can be a 0 out of 10 for evilness. Hey, we're keeping up with our streak for good dragons from the last challenge video, thoroughly discounting the April 1st video, which we shall never speak of again. Once his limbs are all on, he only needs his wings, which are larger than Orklet's, but still small dragon. That's a good thought, actually. Orklet and Cliff have probably met at least once when Queen Coral visited the Sky Kingdom. So awesome. Now little Prince Cliff is finished. Anyways, I really like Cliff and all the baby dragons in this series because they sort of temper the more serious aspects of the books and provide a little comic relief. Forgive me, but I am here for the comic relief. Plus, I also really like these tiny sized dragons because they're throwable, squeezable, and palmable. Okay, awesome. Time for the next plush. For all the people in the comments who've asked me to do Glory next or whatever, I would like to direct you towards this workplace productivity management flowchart. And I will do Glory eventually, I promise, but unfortunately that is not how the alphabet works. I wish it was though, because a lot of my favourites are at the end of the list, and I really want them as plush. I'm definitely ignoring this flowchart right now though, because I cannot leave Cliff without his mother for that long. So our next character is Queen Ruby. These come as a matched set, do not separate. Also, this is super convenient because I haven't got up to a large skywing before. It's been a lot of sea wings, sand wings, and night wings. They're hoarding the front half of the alphabet, seriously. I have a few things to say about the making process. The skywings are kind of the most basic dragon. They have all the things one would expect from a dragon, and no surprises. That doesn't mean they're not cool, but it might be a little easier for you if you wanted to start off with one kind of dragon. They don't have fiddly spines like ice wings, curled tails in any direction, or multiple sets of wings. Anyways, it's time to start sewing, starting with the spines, which as I mentioned before are significantly less annoying than the icewing or rainwing spikes. There's seriously tons of those to snip out and invert on many of the other dragons. Also, I just want you to know that the colour palette for Queen Ruby was a nightmare headache, and you shall see why as this challenge progresses. There's just so many red skywings, and such specific reds as well. Like, it's almost impossible to find different types of reds for the plushies. I managed to find these pink toned colours that go together nicely for Ruby, but it was a struggle. This colour scheme is not that close to canon, but I had this thought in mind to make her look a little like Tourmaline, like that her scales had just a hint of leftover orange from her previous identity, who I suppose is functionally gone now, or like merged with Ruby? That's kind of cool. Oh well, I got a strong vibe, a vision, a flight of fancy even to make her orangey red-pink. Orink. I complain a lot about all the character designs giving me pain, but I just want you guys to know I design all the characters long before I make them into plushies, and I have nearly 100 designs for characters. 100. And that's why some dragons who are important are shoved off into the extra character wild round sheets. I mean, I am subject to changing my mind about it whenever I feel like it, so no guarantees anyone who is on there either will or won't be made. Very at the mercy of how I am feeling on a particular day. But that's some surprise value for you. You're welcome. Anyways, but a lot of side characters have an almost identical design to a main character, and I wanted our main characters to stand out a little more, so tragically, many beloved random losers are confined to our sheets of extra characters. And now we turn her right side out. Once again, much easier to do without a coiled tail or colour shifts down the body. If you're new to sewing, I'd recommend you actually make one of these floppy beanie baby sort of dragons I released in the last video, but if you're utterly determined to make a big one, make a skywing. They're a lot easier to follow. But good luck finding red tone number 327 for the precise colour of Garnet's right butt cheek. Now we have to do Ruby's horns. Her head horns are wobbly, which I thought was an awesome skywing thing, but a lot of the characters in the graphic novels have wobbly horns, not just skywings. And also not Ruby. Yeah, that's right, she doesn't even have these in her graphic novel appearance. They're more like how I've interpreted sandwing horns, but I reject this look. I want the wobbly ones, they're better. It's also time to make Ruby's head. I feel like the skywings have a longer and skinnier face than the other tribes, so I try to make the bridge of the nose distinct and sharp, and the chin insert piece not too wide. And when I stuff the head, I make sure the nose isn't overstuffed. I think I've made at least 100 dragon heads, but I still think there's room for improvement. Time to attach her facial features now. Skywings have a lot of horns, similar to sandwings. They have spikes on their jaws as well as their nose. I think I mentioned this when I was doing the rainwings, but the dragons, which I add nose or cheek spikes to, just depends on how important I think it is to their overall design. Skywings are for sure the most wiry and classic dragon-like dragon in my head, so the nose horn is super important. I made Ruby's horn even bigger than I usually do, because she's royalty and deserves it. The nose horns are literally a speck in the graphic novel. Don't worry, graphic novel artists. I forget the nose horn on my own dragon too, even though it's attached to his face. Ruby also has pretty bright red eyes in my brain palace, but I went with what my heart told me. She has an animus enchanted earring with a teardrop gemstone which used to turn her into a weak-willed dragon, but now simply maintains her appearance and restores her memories. And also, looks cool. I picked this intensely glittery shiny bit for her. The dragon ear piercing procedure is a lot more painful in plushie form than if it were to happen in real life. Ruby has small rubies, the gemstone, embedded in between the scales around her eyes. I kind of interpreted this more as glittering freckles. I thought that looked the most appealing. And I picked these quite small sequins because I didn't want to trot on Scarlet's whole thing. The gemstones are a lot more prevalent in her design. But Ruby is still royalty, so she deserves some bling. Onyx mentions that scale inserts are very painful. I was going to compare them to tattoos for people, but then remembered that dragons can also get tattoos. I don't know how it works when they have scales and would have to shed those. I don't know if everyone knows this, but reptiles have skin too. It's under the scales. You can see it on my snake here, who I am annoying right now, but what else is new? Anyways, the gems are cool, and dragons with tattoos are not my problem. Yet. So I don't have to think about the logistics of that. I did do some of the gems on the eyebrows, but only because it's cool. They're pretty subtle as an end effect, which is good, because Scarlet's would be much more blingy in my imagination of her. Ruby didn't get that much from her mother, except of course certain style choices, and the ability to break negs efficiently. Time to attach Ruby's head. Apparently she has an unusually long neck, which is, interesting. But I did do it. It's technically like a centimeter longer, so there you go if you're a stickler for details. It's also time to make Ruby's legs. At the beginning of Winter Turning, Ruby first appears in the scales. Here she is, not caring if an entire squadron of skywing soldiers die in battle. Or maybe she's bluffing. But I think that she was intended to be more of a Scarlet-alike originally when she was first introduced, just based on how callous and cruel she seems in this short segment. She was probably less sympathetic and understanding. I think her character was changed in order to cut the Skywings a break. They have a terrible track record for queens. In the Guide to the Dragon World, there's a brief portion on the previous queen before Scarlet, Firestorm, who was also insane, although perhaps marginally less than Scarlet. And also, the Skywing army was devastated in the War of Succession. And Ruby being nice does lead to her being a better queen in this case. Although she does support the extermination of Skywings with dangerous differences, and in historical times, all Skywings who were born with flame scale or who were suspected animi were thrown from the high cliffs of the Skywing hatchery to die by fall damage as babies. And it seems like they have been doing that for a really, really long time, as it was a point made during the time of Darkstalker. So, maybe I don't think that piece of Skywing tradition is strictly ethical. But she does sort of walk back on that after she considers what would have happened if Cliff was Fire Scales. She wouldn't want to kill him. She mostly thinks about how they should have done that because she thinks Peril is what's wrong with the Sky Kingdom, and imagines her as a symbol of the violence and bloodshed and needless opulence of her mother, Queen Scarlet. I like Ruby's character arc. Realizing Peril is a dragon with a life and a personality beyond what she was used for, and also that she is as much of a product of Scarlet's stellar parenting as Ruby is. It's sweet, and good for her. Ruby and Peril are sort of in the same boat. Scarlet really was horrible to her, and apparently Scarlet has 16 children and 11 of them are dead, meaning all of Ruby's sisters were murdered. That is a horrible ratio of a live baby to dead baby, by the way. Even considering that Coral's daughters were also being killed off in huge numbers, she is still destroying Scarlet in the baby ratio, which is a bad sign. Anyways, I understand why Ruby has some damage over that, as her memories of being Tourmaline manifest in the form of thinking that she was talking to another lost sister. I think it's safe to assume she probably feels a little hurt about the whole thing, and anything she associates with Scarlet is extremely unpleasant to her. It also motivates her, sort of depressingly, to be a better parent than Scarlet was. Low bar. But it's good to rebuild the royal family. I don't even think there's anyone else who could take over from Ruby. Scarlet killed them all. But she's trying to free herself and her tribe from the reign of Scarlet when nobody else is. 0 out of 10 for evil. And definitely good for her. It's time to make the wings. They're bigger than a normal dragon's wings. They're also more curved than normal wings. That way they don't drag on the ground when they're flopped down at your plushie's sides. I mean, unless your skywing is short, in which case I suppose they will touch the ground when in flop mode. The wing veins are also a bit different. Make sure to use the correct inner wing parts if you're making a skywing, as they are longer. Whenever you're attaching body parts down, go over every seam as many times as you can. Also, using multiple threads will increase the strength. Unfortunately, I haven't made many big-sized dragons who have cuddly toy personalities, so I have to snuggle with Burn. But the dragons can survive squeezing and being sat on if you make the stitches as strong and neat as possible. And who doesn't want to cuddle a dragon plush? Well, maybe not Burn, but as I said, my options are woefully limited. Now to do the feats. Also, Ruby is mentioned to have rings on her claws. I can't really do that. They don't really have claws, they have squishy paws, which is cute, but also the whole reason Six Claws' design doesn't work very well as a plushie. Well, as one of my plushies at least. And I love Six Claws, but I do not yet know how to reconcile this issue. For now though, that means Ruby is done. She's a much nicer queen than Scarlet. I really want to know more about what the dragons do to heal themselves and others, and Ruby has invited doctors from the other tribes to spread knowledge, so that's cool. I want to know what they're up to. And also, Ruby is a good mother, which is a shockingly rare character trait in the pantheon of dragon parents. I mean, like, she's competing with her own mother, who murdered 70% of her children. I said it was a bad ratio. I meant it. And now that Ruby and Cliff are done, they can go up onto my shelf together. I'm just going to squeeze them in wherever I can. I have a plan for the future of this shelf. Alright, video over. Get out of here. What are you waiting for? Go home. Okay, fine. You've all bent my wrist. I'll make Carnelian now. Because, you're right, Carnelian. If this episode of the series has taught us anything, red is the best colour. This video is seriously just the Skywing special. Skywing enjoyers celebrate. I didn't initially add Carnelian to my list because she's a red Skywing in a list of red Skywings, and I was struggling really hard to make her unique. In this video, it's literally entirely red Skywings, so you can see the issue here. But then I had an idea. And we'll get to that in a minute. Oh, we'll get to that. Some spoiler warnings for the 7th book of Wings of Fire. If you don't want to get spoiled for an aspect of that book, flee now into the hillside. Hear ye, hear ye. A dire warning be upon you. And pestilences on your crops, or something. Anyways, so assume if you're still here, you're ready to hear the spoiler, so here it is. The 7th Wings of Fire book, retelling by Peter. Oh my god, guys, you're cramping my style so bad. Horrifying visions of the future! You're all going to die! We're marching to a cold, lifeless tomb to end tropic disaster and the inevitable heat death of the universe! Lame. That book was so brutal, and in case you're wondering, that is exactly what happens in it. Anyways, so now I'm tracing out all of the parts for her body, which are this obnoxiously bright red that once put together is just like glowing. It's like insensitively red to all the Skywings who I feel should be red but are technically orange. Cough, cough. Scarlet. It's in the name, darn it! But anyways, there's a very subtle difference between the red of her main body and her spine, but I pinky swear they are not the same. It's just that right now they look like it. Carnelian actually has slightly off-white spines and horns, which is pretty unique. Most of the Skywings have red or black or grey, but she's got at least one thing going for her despite being the sort of standardly foul-tempered, fire-breathing red lizard that everyone expects of a dragon. To be honest, she had depths to her that didn't make her foul-tempered, although anyone on the outside would have looked at her and decided she was a jerk. Only Moonwatcher, as a mind reader, had that insight into her less than confident inner world and could know about her wanting to be a doctor. I really wanted them to be friends. Carnelian had the potential to be a really interesting character. She wasn't just made for cannon fodder reasons, which I really appreciate, but it also means that her death was extra super duper brutal. Yikes. Oh well, she can live on in plushy form. Seems like it's the best she's getting. She has straight horns in the graphic novel. It actually took me a while of deliberation if I was going to do that or wobbly horns, like the typical skywing. And I did just go on that rant about the wobble horn supremacy, but I went with straight. Because Carnelian is unique and special, and now I'm making her head. In the graphic novel, she really has two things going for her. She is red, like intensely red, and also her head is very smooshed. Listen, I'm a graphic novel enjoyer and I think they're fun and silly, but you cannot deny that something has begun happening to the snouts of the dragons as they've been drawn again and again.
Ma! Yo, there's a stray cat outside!
I'm not bullying the graphic novel dragons, but I think Carnelian is a victim of this, and I feel if she appeared in the first arc, she'd be drawn more like one of these guys. Although they are very knobbly. Carnelian as she is very cute though, most of the time, when it's not pug-like. They have good and bad angles. I also gave her pink accents, but not like a coral pink, like a baby pink. I'm a big fan of pink. I used to be very against it because it wasn't very masculine. But I have changed my mind. Pink is one of the best possible colours. And look how nice it plays with all these other colours. Pink and blue is a winner, pink and purple, pink and green even, and of course, pink and red. Which is the main theme of this video, red. I didn't plan it this way, just so you know. I was just going to make Cliff, but then I felt bad he needed his mother, and I really am a Carnelian enjoyer, so I knew I wanted to make her at some point, even if it wasn't in the mainline challenge. Like the wild character round or some kind of Jade Mountain complete winglets extra video. But no, it had to happen now, and so my entire video is red. Oh well. Now I'm attaching her head, and as I said before with Ruby's wings, when you're sewing anything, keep in mind to go over every seam 2, 3, 4, as many times as you can without losing your mind. It secures the stitches and keeps it all together. Half of the time spent on these plushies, I swear, is just double securing stitches. I leave that out of the videos, it's really boring. And now I've reached the leg portion, and the part of the video where I put my hands on my hips and say that I feel like nobody sufficiently reacted enough to Carnelian's death in the story. How dare they? Even Ruby was frankly impartial, which I think is ridiculous considering Carnelian wanted to be a doctor, and one of the only things we knew about Ruby at the point where this happens was that she evidently valued medical knowledge, as she had introduced doctors from other tribes to instruct her own. Moonwatcher could have been her friend. They could have bonded. Carnelian might have even gotten along with Kinkajou in like an annoyed and sarcastic way. Moonwatcher did foresee a future where Carnelian kills Kinkajou, so I don't know how serious that murder thing is. But Moon and the rest are very sad, but they're not devastated. Everyone should throw themselves at Carnelian's crisped up feet and weep uncontrollably for 3 days and 3 nights by my decree. And if I don't see honest weeping, then you will be doused with water until it at least looks like you're crying. So, you know, everyone better get on doing that. It's only what she deserves. As for Carnelian being evil, well, I did mention the potential future timeline where she kills Kinkajou, but that doesn't count. She was valiantly restraining herself. She has killed a lot of dragons, though. I mean, it's like a year after an all-out war, and the dragons don't really have the concept of being a conscientious objector to violence, so I assume they all got drafted and had to, up until very recently, kill each other. And the only tribe that wasn't involved in the war was getting kidnapped and having unethical experiments done on them. So, like, everyone is not very happy, and I forgive Carnelian for her thoughts of beating up dragons and for being a murderer. That sounds bad. But Carnelian ultimately wanted to help other dragons. She was loyal to the Skywings and Queen Ruby above all else, and showed serious promise as a student, even if she repeatedly and increasingly desperately tried to leave the school, as the reality of being roommates with Kinkajou and Moonwatcher settled in for her. But she could have grown to appreciate the other tribes, and she could have helped others. I think Carnelian was ultimately good, and as such, I will rate her a 1.5 out of 10 for evil. A little stabby, not too shabby. I mean, like, as far as skywings go, there's a lot of cranky ones. I think Scarlet did a number on their collective psyche. Actually, I changed my mind here. I'm going to redo her legs so she's sitting. I've said before that changing the position of the legs while sewing gives a lot of personality to your plush, like with Ruby standing up very straight or Whirlpool having his chest sort of puffed out. A fellow sewist over on Instagram asked why I made the legs of this pattern separate from the body rather than the conventional way, which is to pattern the legs into the body gusset forever. And it's all because of customization. You can use the longer or shorter legs in the pattern to make your character stand up higher or look smaller, and you can make them stand with their chest sticking forward or their tail drooping down by just moving the legs. And of course, as I'm doing right now, you can make them sit or lay down. I'm also going to attach her wings. Once again, extra large. Since she's sitting down, they definitely will be touching the floor, but that's fine, it's cute. I don't usually make these posable in my plush, but you could do that and avoid the floor dragging if you wanted. Also, Carnelian's joining our Dead and Battle Scarred club, along with Burn and Battle Winner. And also, I'm going to add another feature. So in Book 7, Explosion. Yeah, so Carnelian is immolated immediately, rest in pieces. But she gets burnt so badly, Moonwatcher thinks she looks more half Nightwing than Skywing. And I think it's unique. And also, I'm at least trying a little bit to translate the dead characters who had iconic deaths into plush. RIP Arctic as well. And sorry to my fellow Carnelian enjoyers who want to make headcanons that she survived for this brutal reminder. So it's time for some burnt patches of scales, and I pin them down and put a magnet under them against the flesh. Ew. And then sewed around the edges. I put one on her shoulder, one on her neck, and one on her tail. And it's time to make some dragon flame cactus spike balls, which don't have a canonical reference or particularly clear description, but not only do they catch fire, they spray out hundreds of evil balls of deadly spikes. During Book 7, Turtle gets one stuck in his ear. Ouch. But Carnelian would have been covered if the spikes were not totally incinerated, I don't know. So it's time to pick up my needle felting stuff again. I first tried this when changing the colour of Cricket's eyes in Part 7 because I forgot what colour they were and wanted to fix it. I like needle felting. It's pretty hard though, similar to sculpting. Luckily, all I need to make is some balls. Ow. I knew that was going to happen. These needles are deceptively sharp. I had a very particular vision in my head for how these cacti looked, so I used a needle and thread to make some lines in it, pulling in the wool. The puffed out parts are where I'm going to put the spikes. I also attached a magnet to the bottom. I arbitrarily selected which way was up on this cactus. And here I am breaking out my idea for spikes on the cactus. Since spikes are kind of a hard thing to make and these cacti are really only the size of my thumbnail, I tried it first with some skewers. Didn't work. There's also no real way to secure a spike like that from falling out, so they have to be 3D spikes of puffy fabric paint. These keep their shape fairly well once dried and do honestly form stiff peaks. I accidentally messed some of these up because I didn't give them enough time to dry. And I'm going to make even more of these. One bigger and one little small one, which I'm going to conjoin when I'm sewing in the lines. And also cover in spikes. These are the ones I messed up a little bit more than the others. I'm going to put these aside to dry. Properly this time. Now Carnelian is finished, in all her battle-scarred, crispy, extremely red skywing glory. In these sitting plushies, you can see the pads of their feet, which I usually make the same color as the chest, but it's very easy to forget about them. I don't have them drawn out on my plushie reference sheets, but they're there and they're important. Also, time to magnet on her spiky cactus balls. Don't worry, she can't feel it sticking into her now that she's a ghost. We will be able to have the whole Jade Winglet reunited at some point in the future. A while into the future though, because some of them have names way down the alphabet and there's 100 bajillion characters. Also, we have officially run out of space on the shelf. Thanks for watching! If I made your favorite character, yippee! If I didn't, you will have to wait. Thank you to my patrons. Without you, I wouldn't be able to fund this self-imposed challenge. Huge shout out to Kimber, Cool Cloud, ADH Dream 1409, Kitten Mikey, Haps, Samuel Sanchez, Maisie Peach, Lisa Aguado, Aninka Lemason, Gray, Solvi, Phoenix Fire, I Like the Dumb Bunny Shrimp, Fennec is Here, Trooper Cat, Poppy Willow, Indigo, Woyleys, Fantasy, Skywing Dad, Jed Gore, Aussie Shark, The Starving Child, Ninja Kitty Awakens, Marybeth Little, Lime Sharks, and Nikki Steiner. Your wet sloppy dragon kiss is this time delivered by Cricket. Mwah!